Let you take care of that.
Hello, and welcome to SPSM Chat, brought to you by the people that care the most. Suicide hotlines and mobile crisis around the country are always listening to have you call. Your host, Rudy Caseres, joined by Travis Atkinson and yours truly, Hudson Harris, a pig father.
And we're live. Hey, everyone. Welcome to SPSM Chat. SPSM. If it's Sunday, you know it's SPSM. Did I say SPSM enough times? Why is my camera looking like that? That is so funny. Let us change that right now. Blah, 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 blah. Or let's just, let's not. Okay, so, why the hell is it going like
In the
that?
beginning, everything was dark.
I know. There we go. Cool. So I've yet to do one show where there hasn't been at least something wrong. So that's how you. If it's SPSM chat, then something went wrong in the intro. There we go. I am your host, Rudy Caseres, at Rudy Caseres on Twitter. And this week's topic is holding systems accountable. And my guests this week are Travis Atkinson and Hudson Harris, returning for the millionth time probably at this point. So let's get into the swing of things. You don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from these people because they actually know things. I don't. So if you're watching this live, please let us know that you're here. Let us know that you care. I already see our faithful Laz on Twitch, in the Twitch chat, but we are also on Facebook.com/SPSM chat, YouTube.com/SPSM chat, Twitter.com/SPSM chat. We are, of course, at SPSM chat. Make sure to use the hashtag SPSM if you're in a Twitter chat. That way we can see your tweets and give you shout outs and you can feel like you're a part of our lovely community. And of course, twitch.tv/SPSM chat. We love the growth happening on there. Please keep showing us some support. Thank you, Laz for hosting us and sadly not making my lights go off. So let's get into the swing of things. Without further ado, tell the whole world, the whole SPSM chat universe, galaxy, solar system, who is Hudson Harris.
Hello, everyone. It's awesome to be back, Rudy. Thank you for having me. As always, coming to SPSM is one of those things that I will do at the drop of a hat or with long, rigorous planning that takes months and months to get together. Either way, I'm in. I am a population health strategist. I work with governments and nonprofit agencies and private organizations on how to design better systems of care in the behavioral health world using technology and evidence-based practices.
Awesome. And this is what number time that you've been on SPSM chat of all iterations?
I don't know. I do like a crosshatch on my back of tattoo every time I come on, but I can't see it and I don't have a mirror. But it's a lot.
Well, howdy doody to that. Let's get on to our next guest. Tell the whole world, the whole SPSM chat universe, galaxy, solar system, who is Travis Atkinson.
Thank you, Rudy. Hey, everybody. I'm Travis Atkinson. I am the Director of Clinical and Crisis Consultation with TBD Solutions. We're a behavioral health consulting group, and I oversee a lot of our crisis services consulting. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm also the president of the Crisis Residential Association and the co-chair of the Crisis Services Committee for the American Association of Suicidology. I am a lifelong learner on crisis services and suicide prevention. I love that I get to be, curious every day and try to learn how we're all trying to help one another. And so it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited about this topic. Let me say I've been a fan of SPSM for years, 3-4 years, and I'm humbled to be a part of it, and I'm looking forward to getting my back tattoo right after this is finished.
Yeah, actually, I meant to ask you before this. Is this your first time on SPSM chat?
Yeah, first time. I mean, I have rabble roused on a few occasions on SPSM. Just giving Doc Foreman a hard time for her Muppet show kind of curtain background and just Bart for being who he is. But yeah, this is my first time when I've been allowed to show my face. So I feel like I left a cult or something. It feels pretty liberating.
Yeah, and let's go up to here. Cool. So, yeah, no, it's exciting that we finally get to work together. We've admired each other from afar, and so here you are on SPSM Chat. Finally, we also get to bring back Hudson because I like to do I like to do the panel format, and I knew Hudson would be great for this topic, holding systems accountable. And so I was actually inspired by a tweet that you made. You shared a let me see if I can bring that up. So it was about here we go. Um about the failure to for Thrive NYC, $100 million
This is
diversion
such
centers
bullshit.
for mentally ill sit empty or barely used. And so we hear stories about this quite often. Unfortunately, it's always like we start off with like wanting to give a lot of money to these programs, and they sound good, they make us feel good, and then there's not a lot of accountability, there's not a lot of oversight, there's not a lot of input from people actually who would be using this service, or I hesitate to even say benefiting from these services, but you get the idea. And so I wanted to really deep dive into this topic, and I know, Travis, you're going to talk a lot about that, and I know Hudson is going to have his own say as well. Let's see if we got any more people. First off, hello, Delirium Waltz on Twitch. We appreciate you for being here. If you're on the other platforms as well, feel free to introduce yourself, and I can see your tweets on Twitter as well. Just make sure to use the hashtag SPSM, and while you're at it, make sure to give us a follow on all of our platforms. Okay, so let's get into the swing of things. I'll start with Travis, and then I'll go with Hudson, and then we'll devolve. Let me get centered. Um, I'll start with Travis, then we'll go into Hudson, and then we'll devolve into complete anarchy. And I'll just sit back, I'll drink my seltzer, and we'll have a gay old time. So let's get into it. Travis, for you, when you see stories like this, what is your gut reaction?
Well, Rudy, two things come to mind. The first is this thought that this virtue-filled hope that I imagine we're all carrying, which is trying to answer this question about how we can be the most helpful. And for some people, this is their answer. That if that the solution is to build something, to do it in a big way, and to kind of chase that shiny new object. I think as humans, we are kind of like fish. Like, we like that really shiny lure. It's much more attractive than anything that's old in the tackle box. And it's often our demise, because there is not the accountability that we want, that we should see, or that we need to see in the design of our crisis services. So I acknowledge people's attempt and the noble try at trying to make their system better. I'm also angered. I'm angered because there is accountability missing in the system, partly because people don't understand how to make it better. And that's because they believe that only the ways that we have tried, or the ways that are the most popular to provide crisis services in this example, are the solution. And they're not. What the research has shown us, going back to the 1970s, that many of the solutions are actually very simple. That you can support people with a diagnosis or a set of symptoms as severe as a first episode psychosis, and you can provide support to them from people who are just naturally empathic, who don't have a professional degree, and you can have better outcomes than a psychiatric hospital. I constantly ask my colleagues in the behavioral health profession, show me the outcomes about psychiatric hospitals. Show me how they are the tried and tested method for treating people with a mental illness, or people who are in a crisis. I think it is this choice that we've made to say, well, we've always believed in this, or we've always had this as part of our system, but we don't ask enough about the question about why it works. So the last thing I'll say before I let Hudson riff is we could do so much better. We have self-driving cars, and we have the most amazing foods and electronics and all of these things that we've done. And we have a dismal behavioral healthcare crisis system. And we only have to look back 5, 10, 50, 100, 200, 300 years to realize we keep getting it wrong, that we keep doing a disservice to people. We don't treat them how we should. And I think there's a big issue that we have to unpack, which is at the top, at the county level, at the state level, and at the federal level, who is holding the responsibility for the success of the system. And in the case of this NYC example, I think it proves that no one is. I don't think that there's anybody that's standing up and saying, you know what, this was a mistake. We shouldn't have done it this way. We're shirking responsibility. These are people's lives. We have safety net systems in every state in the country and every local community, and we're failing people when we don't create them in the best way possible and hold ourselves accountable and take a fearless inventory of sorts to ask ourselves if we're not doing it right. It's okay. It's okay to be learning. It's okay to be working on these things, but it's very sad when we build something like this. I think it was to the tune of $50 million, and then it goes unused, and we say we invested in behavioral health services. Not really. You spend a bunch of money on a building, but you probably let a lot of people in your community down who subsequently had to receive care in a higher restrictive environment, went to jail, went to prison, maybe died by suicide. And I'm not trying to be a fanatical, skeptic of all these things that could have happened. But in reality, without a good crisis system there, having an empty building and people suffering, that's a sad pairing.
Now, for those who don't know, and I don't know everything, so correct me if I'm wrong or leave anything out. Thrive NYC, it's a major mental health program initiative in New York City, run by the governor. I know the governor's wife, Shirlene McCray, does a lot of work with it, and there was criticism in the beginning that they weren't doing enough programs that helped the quote unquote seriously mentally ill, and so they added on to that, and a lot of criticism is that it was mostly just about like making people feel better and hashtags and slogans and commercials and billboards and all that stuff, and like how does it actually work? So am I doing that justice?
Lipstick on a pig.
Sorry,
it's lipstick on a pig. It's the approach of lipstick on a pig. We're going to take something and we're not really going to change anything systemically. We're just going to like add little color and make it look better, even though it doesn't really.
Speaking of Hudson, it is now your time to rip.
Travis, well said. I think one of the things that like I keep getting asked over and over again when I do the work that I do with different agencies and different governments, people ask like, what do you like, how do you change things? And like, how do people like figure out that things can go different and all this stuff? And I said, it's like we're all little kids at a campfire. Okay. And there's a fire and there's a counselor and someone's telling the story. They're like, gather around the lore and legend of health and human services. And it's all this shit that we believe we do because we always have done it that way. And I can't tell you the number of times that I have gone into meetings and people have been like, this is how it is. And I go, why? That's how we do it. Okay, so like, is there law? Is there statute? Like, do we have like some board labs? Like, what is driving this? And so many times people just keep doing it because that's what we've always done. And I feel like that, like, Travis, you hit the nail on the head. Like, we just keep recycling the same things over and over again because we're afraid to innovate in this space is one. I think we're also afraid to invest money in this space. Like, I have an entirely different SPSM dedicated to like the bullshit of meaningful use, boxing out behavioral health providers and psychiatric hospitals and other things. But like, we won't invest in it. We're scared of change. And it's really one of those things that like Travis hit the nail on the head. It's that accountability piece. Who's responsible at the end of the day? And the thing is, it's like, it's almost like we need civilian oversight boards for things that like take care of those that are, the least in our society. I don't know, the police should have them, behavioral health network should have them. Like, we need to do these things, and not non-functional community advisory boards, truly oversight committees that are staffed with experts, not volunteers that have time just because they can. Not that they shouldn't be there and be a part of it, but we need like actual provider experts. There's so many advisory boards that I've seen that are staffed by volunteers. Well, who can do it? Volunteers are largely retired people. They're largely more affluent areas. They're people that can go to meetings during the day. There's all of those things. So we need to like really invest in these things. And like, I would say my reaction to like the New York thing is I'm not surprised. So New York spends, their average, the last Vera report was they spent $200,000 a year on a mental health offender, the highest in the nation. $200,000 a year. Like if you don't have the oversight piece and you don't have the things put together to hold people accountable at the top of the system in a way that doesn't allow them to fudge it, they won't. Like, we don't report well in behavioral health. Like, full stop. Like, I worked on 1115 projects. There was a region I worked in. There were 65 1115 projects through Medicaid year one. Year two, there were 3 because the other 62 projects could not report about what they were doing. So we're not good at reporting what we do. We're not good at adapting to change. So we just keep recycling the same thing over and over again.
Now, you talked about who should be a part of accountability. And like in California, we have like the mental health with MHAOSCQT474.
MOSAC is what I call them. MOSAC.
There we go. Like I'm not quite sure what the equivalent like that is in New York, if they even have an equivalent. But I want to get Travis's point of view on this. Who should be the ones being accountable, or who should be the ones that are accounting? I guess who should be the accountants?
I feel like Will Ferrell was an accountant in like one of those was it like The Other Guys or something. I feel like he would be a good place to start.
Absolutely.
Okay, so who should hold this thing accountable? First of all, we have to know what is good in crisis care. We have to know what the best ideas are, what the best outcomes are. And unfortunately, sometimes that's politicized. Sometimes you get the providers with the most money or the most exposure that let their ideas be known, and they get bought into by other entities which have influence or have power in this conversation. But we have to. One of the things that excuse me really burns me about Medicaid has become 50 different ideas on how to approach healthcare. And, there are one of these hated phrases for me, at least in any part of behavioral health crisis care, is if you've seen one X, you've seen one X, right? If you've seen one call center, you've seen one call center. Okay, can we stop that? Can we just, yes, we're all different. Can we start to say, yes, but everybody can agree these things are good. Okay. I've heard time and time again at conferences and speeches and webinars across the country, there's no standards for crisis care, no national standards. Great. Can we stop celebrating the anniversary of that statement? Can we get to a point where we have new problems and stop getting familiar with the problems that we already have? So who should be accountable for this structure? Well, whoever's paying for the services should keep their providers accountable for performance. But that should not be done in a punitive way, in a way that is, you're never good enough. I've lived in systems like that where the payer took on this, this almost like villainous type of mentality, which was, we're always going to find something wrong that you're doing. And when you fix that thing, we're gonna find a new thing that you're doing wrong, because that's how we keep our power. That is how we remind you of who's. I see a hand in the back. That's how we remind you of why we're important. This has to be collaborative, and unfortunately, the best communities don't get the largest amount of the brightest spotlight. Let's say, and the best communities are all on the same page. I use this analogy. Imagine if you have a couple of cars with headlights on in the dark, and they're in a parking lot, and the problem that they're trying to illuminate is in the center. Okay, it's right here, and we have the cars, we have the payers and the providers, and they are like pointing their headlights directly at each other with no light illuminating the problem, because all they care about is this fighting dynamic. It's ironic too, by the way, okay? We're supposed to be helping people, and there's so much garbage happening in the industry. It's gross. Like, can't this at least have some kind of like purity to it or some wholesomeness? But the good systems, the good communities, They're all taking their cars. They're in a semicircle. None of them are pointing at each other, and they're all pointing their headlights at the problem. And whether you're a payer, an administrator, or a provider, you're saying this is our collective problem, and we're going to solve it together. And they care so much about their community that they're actually not trying to show people about their model, because what they care about is their community. Like nobody in that community by and large has anything to gain from other people replicating it. They should replicate it. The other communities should, but like, just, I guess the converse of that is like, be suspicious of anybody that's telling you that this thing is easy. Okay. It's not easy. It starts with everybody laying their ego down. And to get a state administration to do that, or a county administration, I think is really difficult. But the counseling question I love to come back to is, how's that working out for you? And along those lines, what metrics, what performance indicators are you willing to hold yourself to say that it is working for you? And whatever ones you pick that aren't garbage structure measures, I bet you're going to have to come back to us and say, it's actually not working very well. So, and the last thing I'll say about that, and we can touch on this hopefully maybe later in the hour, is as long as the hospital systems are driving this conversation and they're telling you what the most important pieces are of crisis, and in the words of one of my friends and favorite consultants, Kathy Maidenwald, she says, if you start with risk in designing a crisis system, you will get it wrong every time. That we cannot have this be about liability and about, doctors getting sued. That can't be the first thing that comes out of our mouth. This has to be a balance of, when you take on some more risk and you accept that this is complex but solvable, you will benefit in the reward. And that is literally where I think every innovation in the behavioral health crisis system has come from, is because somebody said, we will exchange a little bit of risk in the hopes of some reward. And they had the ecosystem or the environment to do it in, and it turned out beautifully. So I think the question was around, who should be accountable for this? Of course, the states and the payers should, but also in a Medicaid system, which is where most of our crisis services are funded, the federal government has no jurisdiction over that. And so you're going to leave it up to every state to decide if they want to hold themselves accountable. I don't know how you get beyond that, except maybe the lived experience movement. I think that is actually very powerful. And we have a lot we could glean from, like, the disability movement from 40 years ago. We could enact that into something related to behavioral health. And I think you could actually see good outcomes. But unfortunately, a lot of the communities where I try to dig for those answers, I don't see them as angry as I believe they should be about this. So.
Sorry, my eyeballs almost popped out, like when you said like lived experience and disability community. I was like, yes, of course. Like,
we should all have a problem with this, whether you've gone through the system or not. We should all have a problem with how it's working.
Yes, and I see people in the chat who've got problems too. So let's get them. Laz on Twitch. Let's put you over here. Says, people who must have to live with the fucking consequences. People who most have to live with the fucking consequences of decisions. I'm assuming that you're referring to the people who should be doing the counting. Okay, so
right, yes.
Is Isabel on Facebook? Hello, prior guest, future guest, says, afraid to innovate? I would say afraid of giving up power. Yes. We need to go further on that, Isabel. Double down, triple down. We want to hear more. And thank you, Laz, for making my lights go off. Thank you, Delirium Waltz, who says, durable outcomes are critical. Doing crisis counseling, that is always my anxious space. Am I creating a durable outcome? Anyone?
Hudson, I felt like, well, before we respond, I think that's worth responding to. But before that, I felt like maybe you and I were going to church here on Sunday night, and I wanted to give you a chance to speak everything that your hands were telling you. You're muted also.
Well, it wouldn't be SPSM Chat.
I have a puppy. I have an 11-month-old puppy who's like aggressively working a ball or yak cheese, so it's for all of our benefit. Mental health and mental hygiene is the name of the New York City department. Weirdly enough, that's actually responsible for the whole thing that goes on there. I didn't want to interrupt, but it's mental hygiene. It's weird. I think, again, Travis, I would echo everything. And I would say that the thing that has really stuck out to me the most is if we look at like safety standards, if we look at reporting standards, if we look at things where we have industries where we are routinely looking at figuring out their level of performance, there's like some really, really clear common threads that we don't do in behavioral health. And like, I wanted to call this AIRS, but like that's already taken. Automatic and fallible reporting. And like at the end of the day, now when we do actually build systems that support reports from one organization to another, an organization to an authority or to the public or whatever, they're curated, they're crafted, they're coiffed. It's like trimmed like the butter sculpture at a Michigan State fair, right? Like it's gonna melt with any pressure or heat. What we need are automatic data reporting. We need the ability to report not only at a micro level on the individual, how they're doing under consistent and clear measures, but also how a program is doing, how a system is doing. And the only way that we do that is to start to take away, I should rephrase that. We should start to make sure that people have to share data with us in certain ways, and that we don't let them do all this crafting. We need to take away some of the control that individual agencies and partners and providers have and say, hey, it's like a train. If a train is on the tracks, it's going to report automatically, no matter whether it's BNSF or Norfolk Southern. Like we have these things in our society where we require automatic reporting, and we don't do that in behavioral health. And part of that challenge is, why can't I go look at how many people are incarcerated right now? Why can't I go look at how many suicides there are right now that's year to date? Why can't I go to a university and find out how many suicides have occurred at that university? Because we let people do these things with data that enables them to just create and tell the story they want. Data should be like Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. It's silent witness. It doesn't make judgment calls on data. It reports, and you have to define the definitions up front. I get all of that, but that's something that I think we need to add to this piece.
And if I can just add where some of this danger falls in, Rudy, is when we are talking about a lot of money that's about to be funneled into the behavioral health crisis system, and part of this is Biden's plan, his tax plan, or not his tax plan, but just his bill that was passed. We're talking about a set aside for the mental health block grant through SAMHSA, which is also coming through for crisis services. It's very important that we understand what crisis programs need to be replicated if infrastructure is indeed what we want to put money into. But let's ask that bigger question of, if you have $1 million in your community for crisis services, what should you do? Build a new crisis service, enhance the current crisis service, or create an accountability system, and underwrite a crisis administrator in a community, for example, to know the ins and outs of these services. We for too long, we've allowed behavioral health to be an anecdotal industry where we have said, as long as you tell me a story, like Hudson said, as long as you play with the data in a way that makes me feel good and I can go to bed at night, then that'll be fine. Have you all ever asked yourself this question? And this question's for both of you as well as whoever's listening tonight. Have you ever asked your question, if a suicide prevention association was really committed to their mission, then wouldn't they take almost personally any efforts to decrease suicide rates? Shouldn't you say that in your annual report, that here's what we did to either raise awareness about suicide or to help in suicide prevention, and here were the results? Some people might say that is very extreme, Travis, that you can't go that far. And I think we are selling ourselves short when we say, well, we can't control a crisis and we can't stop suicide and we can't do all these things. I think, as a matter of fact, the old dad phrase that I've picked up is, well, not with that attitude. You can't you can't think you're going to change these things. It's like the zero suicide movement. Like I bet before zero suicide, nobody was like, yeah, this is wonderful. This is what's going to happen. But we have to expect more from ourselves. And I don't think I think we're better off having strong ambitions and making a strong effort instead of playing it safe and having a tolerance for the amount of pain and suffering that we have in our communities as it pertains to behavioral health crisis. We should be doing more. We can do more, and there's no parity or equity or an indication that we love or care about people who are in crisis when we don't give them exactly what they need when they need it.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation because I don't think you're necessarily going to be lowering suicide rates if your campaign is mostly about awareness. It's mostly about making people feel good, or even just letting people know about resources. I mean, we say it a lot about how suicide prevention is a social justice issue, and you don't get a lot of that in these campaigns. I don't really see it in Thrive NYC, because then people have to, and I know like Charlene McRae is Black woman, but it forces people to have to have uncomfortable conversations about their own prejudice, about their own implicity and biases, and nobody wants to do that. People just want to just put the numbers out there to have people know about the resources, but they don't want to really talk about like why people are in such states of crisis. What say you, Hudson?
Oh God, I have so much. It's like you could not have picked a topic that's like more in my I want to take out a sword and whack down some shit. I just want to add a piece of data to what Travis said. This is one of my favorite statistics to quote. I can certainly send people the paper on this. I've done it before and I will do it again, and it is accurate. Okay, 2018 there was a study done on acute psychiatric care, and I will put this out to the Twitterverse and wait 10 seconds for anyone that wants to actually answer. What percentage of people in acute psychiatric situations, out of all of them, received evidence-based care in 2018?
4.
Anyone? 2018, I'm sorry. God, I am so old. 2018. 33%. 1 out of 3 people received evidence-based care in psychiatric emergency. Behavioral health is an anecdotal industry. Preach it, Travis.
Well, I mean, even with the evidence-based care, is that include involuntary
it's
treatment?
It's better than some schmo who hung out a shingle and is deciding that he's gonna, I don't know, wrap me in a tight blanket and give me teddy bears. Science is better than nothing, because anecdotal means that people are just trying shit out there willy-nilly and holding themselves out as doctors or as psychologists that know what they're doing.
Yep. And so to bring this back to the funding that's coming down the pipeline is these services that have been deemed to be the most important and the most critical for each community are crisis call centers, mobile crisis teams, and then they're called crisis receiving centers. Excuse me, is the third. Crisis call centers been around since the 50s. Dr. Edwin Schneidman of the AAS fame created the first one in LA back in, I believe it was 58. Mobile crisis teams been around since, depending on who you ask, either the 60s or the 70s. There's about 500 of these teams across the country. Both of those have some research evidence behind them. But then these crisis receiving centers, which are intended to take anyone, regardless of acuity or height, extremeness of symptoms, there's less than 200 of these in the country, and yet there are about 800 crisis residential programs, and then we got another 50 or 75 peer respite programs. I should have brought a slide. Maybe I'll still bring a slide. But I'm saying this because the crisis residential programs, which are home-like alternatives to psychiatric hospitalization, those are the programs I was talking about earlier that have had outcomes when compared to psychiatric hospitals, better clinical outcomes, equal or better client satisfaction, about 60% of the cost. Those are being excluded from these conversations. And so it doesn't make sense that, and there's not a lot of research behind the receiving centers. It doesn't make sense that the services that are the most evidence-based, okay, and have been around for a long time are not being included in these conversations. And there's inconsistencies even in community knowledge of what makes a good crisis call center worker. Some people think you have to have a master's degree to do this really well. Some people think you have to have lived experience to be the best. What actually the research shows that that the amount of experience you have on the call line is what makes you really good at it. So we should invest in making sure that people can stay in crisis work as long as they want to, for that season of their life. And maybe that season turns into 20 or 30 years for some people. But the worst thing that could happen to our workforce would be if we lost people that wanted to work there, but just couldn't make the logistics work. I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but I'm saying this because it's important that when we're talking about accountability, there's got to be accountability in the funding. Like we don't need new buildings. Not to rain on this exciting opportunity for crisis services, but I'm already thinking 5 years down the road, of the ebb and flow that happens in the funding of crisis services. What is going to happen 5 years from now when we have empty buildings that were built with these dollars that could have been used to create better accountability structures for these crisis services, so a higher percentage of them remained, in what would that be, 2026 or something, instead of having this emergency and this cleanup mess and people getting laid off and closing buildings. Obviously I'm like sky is falling. I've had a lot of time in my basement in the last year to think of every doomsday scenario, but I guess I'm just saying that because these efforts need to be really well thought out, and there's a lot of intelligent and passionate people in our industry, but we have to make sure that the right voices are amplified to be the most helpful for the people that need crisis care, not to make the biggest noise or the biggest headline or get the most number of retweets or something like that. I just think that's futile.
Okay, let's take a time out. I know Hudson wants to say some things.
Wait, can I add one thing? It's not my actual comment. I just want to add data to what Travis said.
Sure.
The first systemic study done in the United States in decades and decades and decades on what's
Of course he cuts out right there. Okay, so let's wait for Hudson to come back, and then we'll let's get to some comments from our people. Oh wait, he's back already. Okay. There he is. Cool.
Okay. There we go. Wait, there we go. All right, first systemic study done in decades in the United States on a massive system. What the community needs in terms of crisis care, residential care, behavioral health care, acute inpatient care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Austin State Hospital redesign. If you have not read about what they have done, you should go do it. It's absolutely amazing. And we could have a whole talk on what they've done. But what do you think? How many beds do you think they recommended based upon current capacity, what they had, what they needed to grow to, what was happening down the road, 10 years, blah, 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 blah. How many new beds? 0. I'm just going to go straight to the chase. 0. Because the care needs to be delivered in the communities. It's not this constant build more beds and put people where they don't want to be. So just wanted to add that, just a little bit of data. I'm your data man tonight, Travis.
I love you for being my data man. Let's get to some comments. First off, actually, have you seen the LA control panel run by the city controller, Hudson?
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah, I actually think they did a good job. Actually, when I was on my neighborhood council back when I lived in LA, we had the controller come and give a presentation on this, and I was really blown away because I didn't realize how transparent the city of Los Angeles was with all of the money. And I mean like all of it, like really breaking it down to the nitty gritty, and it's very well done with the data visualization, which I'm sure you can appreciate, Hudson. And so And one would think, like, without saying this, like oh my god, like that's a lot to ask, that's a lot of work, but like this should be part of the budget, the accountability part as well. That should be built in part of it. That shouldn't be something that happens afterwards, after like when you get in trouble and it's like, oh my god, like we need to actually like start like making this accessible, right. Not just and so
the
like it just
works for us.
Yeah.
Like it works for us. We should know. We should know where every dime is. $20,000 for a hammer. Like that was my favorite line out of Independence Day. Like we should know.
That is a great line. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, people, and I used to think like this too before I got involved in my local government, is that you should, like, I know that you might think that, like, oh, like there's people that are in charge of that, people watching out for that are like
No,
minding the P's and Q's and the
no.
house and the money and all that. There really isn't, and it really isn't until like regular people like me and you make a big stink about it, where like the people who are in charge of these organizations, like, oh my god, like, yeah, people actually know about us, and like we need to be transparent. And so like there should be oversight boards for anything like this. Like it should be obvious. And so if you're just out there sitting, and just know that, like, do your research, and I know it shouldn't, the onus shouldn't always be on the citizen, but in this case, do your research, and there's usually some kind of accountability board, and the meetings are public. And so if you really want to have a say about this, and you really want to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing with the money that is ours, the taxpayers, then get involved. And it's, you may think like, oh, I'm not a doctor, or I'm not involved in government. Like, good, we need more people like you,
Hmm.
people who are passionate, like, who are going to be affected by these decisions. So please, please, please don't get dissuaded. Don't think that like the people with 10 letters at the end of the names, elected officials, they've got it all figured out, they're doing the right thing. No, if you're a citizen, if you're a stakeholder, you deserve to know how these funds are being spent and whether or not they're being wasted. Can I get an
Can I
amen?
pull up my soapbox for 10 seconds on this? Because I just want to go to the other end of the spectrum, which is the oversight boards can't suck, because so many are just terrible in how they're designed and how they're built and all these things. They get overburdened and overweighted. So here's the thing, just this one piece. We should be comfortable failing, not failing the people we serve, but that we're willing to innovate and try new things and build things that don't work and then learn from that. Like, and a lot of times the oversight boards or the communities I work with, they suck because they don't reward innovation. They reward doing what, Travis? The exact same
Thing.
thing every
Yep.
time.
Hmm.
Like I've applied for NIMH grants, and I had somebody say, "Wait, where's my camera? Here it is. This thing is the best thing that's ever going to happen to your grant." And then one other reviewer was like, "This same thing is going to kill you, so you're." And then the next time they're flipped, and like there's no rhyme or reason. So like we have to be comfortable with failing. We have to be comfortable with building things and then learning from what they don't do well.
Yeah, like I got into an argument with someone on Facebook a long time ago about how like
You got to do it
they were
on
mad because,
Facebook.
I know they were mad because like there was some law that was going to raise rent, on, you probably have heard of it. I think it was like it might have been H or Triple H that raised money for property owners, or raised property tax for property owners. And part of the money that was involved in this package was an oversight committee, and they were mad because, like, oh, like that oversight committee never does anything, that's just a waste of money and everything, even though the people on the actual board are volunteers and they don't get paid, and they just waste hours of their time just on these like boring ass meetings. But whatever. But it goes to show, like, no, we always have oversight. And just, it's like the same thing with unions. Just because your employer isn't corrupt right now doesn't mean you shouldn't unionize. So just you do it you do it ahead of time, so to avoid corruption and to avoid all the other bad things. Right? Am I wrong? Okay.
No.
I'm going to take this opportunity to show you the infographic that I wanted to about crisis services in the U.S.
Sure.
So
Let me. I have to add it to the screen, but let's do that.
please give
Um,
me permission. Please,
Oh my God, we're
please.
doing it live. I'm
I
really
know
proud of all
that's
of you.
totally
Oh my God,
fine.
it
Doesn't
worked.
fit in the little box, but whatever.
All right. So this is a rough map of how many crisis services there are in the United States. So you add all these up, you get over 2,000 different kinds of crisis services. Okay. And the ones that I mentioned that are included in the bills that are kind of coming out or that are being recommended by the government are the first one, the third one, and the fourth one: crisis call center, mobile crisis, and 23-hour crisis stabilization.
Mhm.
Now, I know these things because I asked the federal government about 6 years ago if they knew these things, and they said no. And I said, all right, well, I guess I'll just use the internet, and one at a time we'll count them all. And so that took 5 years. But what would be helpful is if we all knew where these services were and what their performance was. If you're familiar with HEDIS measures, it's a measure that like hospital systems, I believe, or health plans have to capture. Nowadays, if you didn't know this, like your Medicaid health plan or even your commercial health plan, they have to have some transparency in a bunch of different measures about how they're doing. And some of them are behavioral health, not enough are, but a few of them are. And so you can get a sense, if you're shopping around for insurance plans, you can get a sense of which ones are performing well and which ones aren't. And we should have the same level of transparency in our crisis services. That's probably what's weird about me, okay? It's like, I'm not here to fight the man. I'm not here to say, the system up above is terrible. Guess what? The system down below isn't as good as it should be either. So this needs to go both ways. Like, we have to have accountability in how dollars are being spent within the crisis system, and we have to have accountability of performance within the crisis services as well. Neither one should hide behind anecdotes or keep a very like whitewashed annual report. Like, let's get into the nitty gritty. Like, what really happened? You're doing crisis services, for crying out loud. If you had 100% participation, you probably are lying. Or if you had 100% satisfaction, you're probably lying. Like, don't take a messy thing and not talk about how messy it is or represent it improperly. So I just wanted to show this because it's helpful for us to know. And my organization, we're actually working on talking about some network adequacy standards to say, in the country, every county of 250,000 people or more should have one of these things and two of these things and X number of these beds. We need to get to that point where we just have expectations, because I look at communities and, communities like Cook County, which is heavily hospital run. There's no crisis beds. There's very few mobile crisis teams. There's no pure respite facilities. And I compare that to a San Diego where Hudson's located, and Hudson's doing great work in San Diego. But there were some awesome things about San Diego before Hudson even started working there. You look at the per diem, or I should say per capita crisis residential beds there. It's insane. They've got 60, 70, 100 crisis residential beds. You go to a city like Chicago, they have 0. You go to a city like Houston, they've got 25. Like, why is there discrepancies? Why can we not agree that like these are really good ways to serve people? And we got to peel back the what is protecting some of the entities that play at these tables, and say, and come with some more certainty to say these services are helpful and every community should have them.
Right on. And let's and thank you for sharing the slides. Let's get to some comments from our chatters, and then we'll get into final thoughts. And so, and use that opportunity to approach any topic that we didn't get to during our main conversation as well. Okay, so let's get on to, we got quite a few, but so apologies in advance. Sorry if I don't get to everything. We got a novel from Laz that says, let's get a little closer. Like, the shit we don't know about just very basic things in our healthcare system to begin with is astounding. Like, we don't know objectively what we have in terms of tangible resources in our hospital a lot of the time, but we account for that in budgets. That's a simpler example, but WTF. Thank you, Laz. Isabel Garcia, who decides what is evidence? And that is definitely a conversation that we could have for another show. The whole
that hornet's nest.
Oh, I know. Like, but yeah, no, it is very important. Like, that when we talk about evidence-based treatment, for example, that there are problems with that, of like how the data is collected and who is involved in that data collection and who is left out. But we'll table that for now. And same thing with Laz's last comments. Hey, maybe we can have you both on for that show. I know. Hey, Andy B. Brown is in the house. Hello.
Oh, Andy Facebook. Brown.
I know. I almost didn't put Andy's comment on the screen because it would have been, it's so fire, and like it might have just crashed the stream and we wouldn't have been able to talk about anything else. We'd just be like fanboying over Andy Brown the entire time. So, and Laz also says LA was going to every council meeting and doing presentations on the dashboard to help people know how to understand it and where to find that info, actually, which should just be the usual. Yes, I agree. Shout out to Ron Galprin, LA comptroller. Cool guy. And says also says I don't have to share my okay cool. So and thank you thank you Delirium Waltz for your comments as well. Who says brilliant thought on metrics, of course. Isabel likes my poop emoji pillow behind me. I like it too. I put a little scrunchie on its little twirly thing on its head to make it look nice. Okay, so thank you all. Appreciate that. Thank you for sharing the stream on Twitter, Mark Dymore. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. Appreciate that. Thank you, Gwendolyn and Michelle, for liking the stream on Facebook. We appreciate you. Let's get on to.
You're not going to show my tweet? I actually thought mine was fun.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes it doesn't
I thought
refresh in time. Are you talking about
there's a hot take. There's a hot take.
Oh,
you didn't make the cut, buddy. Sorry.
Where is that the one with the GIF or?
Yeah. Can we put your slide back up, Travis? Just real fast.
Sure, that can be arranged.
Sure, Hudson's directing now.
No, not that one. No.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
there's a couple layers of security though we have to go through.
Oh, okay. So, my comment was that your crisis center icon looked like bacon.
Oh.
I think it's dinner time in the Pacific Coast.
No, if you look at it, it looks like two slices. Look at that.
They're like two hands, man. They're two hands. It's like
okay, all right, that's fine. It's just my hot take. It's a hot take. No one's gonna enjoy it.
It's close, but not too pandemic close.
Oh, that's totally fine. Yeah, I don't see it. Did you use the hashtag? Oh well. Let's move on.
Wasn't that funny?
It's fine. I'm sure I will laugh about it later when it is at least appropriate. Okay, so
I love that about you, Rudy.
Let's get into final thoughts. A classic SPSM segment since the very early days. And again, take this time to talk about anything that you didn't get a chance to talk about or were cut off from, and also make sure to end with how people can connect with you and anything else that you might have coming up in the future. So let's go to Travis.
Thank you, Rudy. So to bring this all together, we have to have a little bit of higher standards for our crisis services for our communities. We owe it to people that when we're having the worst day of our life or a very dark time, we want to make sure that there's a system there to help us and to help other people, not just people we're related to, not just our family members or our friends, but anyone that taking on an altruistic approach to healthcare and well-being is the sign of a good community. I encourage all of you to reach out. If you have health insurance, reach out to your health plan and ask them what crisis services are covered should you have a mental health emergency. And don't be satisfied just with a psychiatric inpatient hospitalization, but ask them what else, what evidence-based practices are you covering so that if me or my family member goes into a crisis, they can be taken care of. And the last thing I want to say is for those of us who are advocates, we can find things to disagree about, but we would be best suited to spend a good portion of our energy finding opportunities to agree and to collaborate and to advocate together. And there are organizations like AAS that try to take on, the experiences or try to advocate for very different groups, like people with lived experience and clinicians and researchers and advocates. But I think we have to come together and speak some of the same language and share some of our experiences. One way to do that, if you're an advocate of residential alternatives to psychiatric hospitalization, such as peer respite facilities or crisis residential programs, is to come to the Crisis Residential Conference, which is taking place October 12th to 14th in Louisville, Kentucky. And that is being put on by the Crisis Residential Association. Also, follow the Crisis Residential Association or AAS or NASCOD on any social media. to learn about some upcoming webinars on busting myths in crisis care. And as a matter of fact, I will be moderating the next webinar, and Hudson will be one of our panelists. So we want to continue the conversation. And if you want some education, and these are things that you want to learn about but don't understand, tweet me, send me a message. I'm happy to share resources with you. I think there is enough really helpful literature and innovative practices out there that we don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over again. We can have higher expectations for ourselves and our collective communities about how to support people who are in crisis.
Thank you, Travis. And you are at Travis J. Atkinson?
That's right.
On the Twitter. And so please make sure to give Travis a follow, because he's always doing cool stuff on there. I came up with the topic for this week's show because of Travis. So thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to make this work. And hopefully we didn't scare you away. And hopefully you will come back on SPSM Chat again in the future, right?
It would be my pleasure, Rudy. Thank you for the invitation. This is a great group, and I had a wonderful time.
Yes, you are officially intoxicated. You are part of our family, and hopefully we never ruin it.
We all float down here.
Final thoughts, Hudson Harris at Mental Strategy on the Twitter.
Travis, that was very eloquent. That was really good. The other place you can find Travis on the Crisis Podcast. It's one of the only and my personal favorite podcasts about crisis. I think the thing that I would add to what we've talked about tonight is really to impart upon everybody that this is a rare time in history. The money that is coming into behavioral health and the willingness to change is at all-time highs. It's going to dwarf any concept of how much money is coming in, but it's up to us to how we spend it. And it's up to us to get involved and to be a part of things. I think really demand oversight, demand that when this money is coming in, find out how much your community is getting and where it's going and how it's being spent. There's more money in behavioral health coffers right now than there probably ever has been. And this is even without some of the changes to meaningful use interoperability to fund behavioral health providers like every other healthcare provider in the country. The other thing I would say to everybody is go out there and be a part of the change. All of you have a path and a part to help us build the mental health system that we all want to live in. We have the chance, and it's here, and we can do this. COVID has had a lot of negative impacts on our lives. We've lost a lot of people. We can rebuild things, and we can really do behavioral health how we should. If you want to reach out to me, I'm at Mental Strategy on Instagram and Twitter, or you can find me hanging out with Rudy or Travis online somewhere. Thanks, everybody.
Now, speaking of COVID, and it's a little off topic, but I had to ask because I know you do a lot of work in this field. Like, are we moving too fast with the change in masks?
Here's the thing. Yes, I think so personally. Not that my opinion matters. I'm not a healthcare professional, but I look at it this way, which is my kids still aren't vaccinated. And if I really want to think about, like, is anybody ever going to go out in the community and be like, are you really vaccinated when someone's not wearing a mask? I call bullshit. Hot take. We'll see how it goes.
And I know we don't have Hamlet in the hizzy right now, but
well, we do have Penelope Von Wrinkles.
Oh,
this is Penny, and she's here, and she loves you, but she just doesn't know how to express it because she's about to fall asleep again.
Is her middle name Bunwinkles? Is that what you said?
Penelope Von Wrinkles. It's a German. Her mother was German. Her father was English, so Penelope Von Wrinkles.
All right, I guess we have no choice but to believe you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's. We have a bonus final thoughts from from our good friend. Let's get this right. From Andy on Facebook, who says,
"Oh boy.
Final thoughts: pulling crisis services together on a big scale requires braiding funding sources and partnering with local and state governments to provide supports by uninsured and prevent patchwork systems where people fall through gaps in systems." Well, we appreciate the work that you're doing in your neck of the woods, Andy, and we I mean, speaking for myself, I hope to see you in the future. I know we weren't able to hang out at AAS this year, but I'm sure next year things will be set in motion. And I just know that you are an awesome person, Andy. And again, trying so hard not to turn this into an Andy Brown fan
Too
cast. So
late.
we're
Too
moving
late.
on.
It's happening.
I know.
It's
It's
already
just like
there.
I knew it.
My T-shirt is
I gotta
slowly
hold myself
changing.
there. Laz, thank you for sharing the MythBusters panel happening on May 27th as well. Okay, so thank you for changing my lights. Okay, and thank you, Delirium Waltz. We appreciate you just giving some last minute shout outs as well before we wrap this mother up. And so Laz says more mobile bacon in rural areas, and I tend to agree. Just make sure to have a impossible meat option as well.
She's not wrong. She's not wrong, Travis.
Okay, so anything else before we completely wrap up?
No, Rudy, you rocking it, man. I last thing I want to say is that you let your crap out there. It's for everyone to see. I have like a little drape behind me to cover my crap up, but I just appreciate you setting your crap out there. Yep.
Just to be fair, that is not literally my crap. It is just it was a Christmas gift several years back. So
we'll see.
Yeah, I assumed that was the case, Rudy.
Okay, so that's a wrap for this week on SPSM Chat. I don't think there will be an after hours this week, but I'm your host at Rudy Caseres. This was Travis Atkinson, amazing person. Hudson Harris, another amazing person. And hope to have them both on again in the future in various combinations. And so this has been SPSM Chat, Suicide Prevention, Social Media, the only show with suicide prevention in it that doesn't actually try to prevent suicide. So we stream live. Obviously live every Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. 6 p.m. Pacific time on twitter.com/SPSM Chat. We are at SPSM Chat on Twitter. And we are also on Facebook.com. Joelle is making my lights flash. I can't control it anymore. Facebook.com/SPSM Chat, YouTube.com/SPSM Chat, where you can see all past episodes, including the Doc Foreman days, including when Hudson was on originally when he was just a little baby strategist. And had and didn't have the mustache, just had the chin hair. It was a fun time.
I was much softer. Yeah, it was a gentler time. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
It was certainly the blurst of times. And twitch.tv/SPSM Chat, and you can also check us out at SPSMchat.com. And I'm at Rudy Caseres on Twitter and other things. That is going to do it for this week. And I know you see Hudson on the screen, and fear not, this is not the last show. This is not leading to the cancellation of my iteration. But the next time you see SPSM Chat, we're going to have a special takeover show. Amadi from Depressed While Black will be taking over the show. She'll be bringing in her team. That is next Sunday, May 23rd, same time, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Mountain time, 8 p.m. Central time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then I will be back on May 30th. Probably no one's going to be watching anyway because it's like Memorial Day and everyone's going to be completely masked off by then and complete bacchanalia is going on. And here I'll be talking about suicide. So until next time, sign us off, Hudson Harris.
Hold your piggies close. Hold your loves closer. And for God's sake, just keep wearing a mask for a little while longer.